very new to you. And, you know, and we talk about evolving, we're talking about technology. Our next topic really hits on point with that. And that is the introduction of artificial intelligence into the legal system.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
We hear so much about artificial intelligence and how it's coming into the medical field with IBM and Watson, how it's already on our phones in a way, right? We look at, for instance, Cortana and Siri and all these other kind of personal assistants. Well, now you're going to be able to get your own AI personal assistant for getting legal advice and legal help. But in this case, and many people are already kind of concerned, like, well, wait a minute. Well, it just so happens that a lawyer is putting together an AI-powered tool which helps domestic violence survivors with filing restraining orders. So, of course, in a domestic situation, the person who is the victim is trying to get away, get to safety. They're right now under physical duress, emotional duress, and a lot of times they need a restraining order to keep this person away because evidently they've shown aggressive tendencies and shown that they are not afraid to overstep boundaries, overstep certain lines in order to get what they want. And so restraining orders are or can be a great tool to, again, give people safety and security while they're going through very, very hard times, such as a really nasty breakup or a really bad divorce. And the problem with filing restraining orders right now is the fact that the process is long, like so much in the legal system. It takes forever, and there's a ton of paperwork to take on. And the process overall is just super complicated. Plus, you have your emotions involved, and you might not just have the time or the emotional capacity to try to do it all yourself. So we have a lawyer named Dorna Moini, I think that's her name, I apologize if I've bastardized that a bit, who has represented multiple people in abusive situations and helped filing restraining orders and whatnot. And so she decided to launch Help Self Legal, which is a fee-based site that uses artificial intelligence to enhance the process of filing restraining order paperwork. And so far, she's gotten a lot of mixed reviews. Right now, the system is only allowed in California, but she is looking to expand it to other states. But again, with other states, a lot of times there's different paperwork and different processes that you have to follow. So it's trying to incorporate this all into this AI system. Now, currently, she's all self-funding it from the way it sounds and just trying to invest all of her money into it to get this off the ground. And again, with the mixed reviews, I mean, from some people are going, well, this makes it simpler, right? Like, you can file it right away. You know, if you get away from the person and you're in fear of your life, well, why do you have to try to set up an appointment to meet with an attorney? And who knows when they can meet with you and how far they are? Because in rural areas, it can be very difficult. And maybe you don't have a vehicle or someone that can drive you to get there. So you can do it all online through this AI system, which is the Help Self Legal. And the price is great too, right? It's only $15 to file this restraining order and get everything processed.
Yeah, she wants to make it affordable for anyone who needs the help to be able to get it. So she's, you know, because there's so many obstacles as a domestic survivor, a domestic abuse survivor. You know, there's so many obstacles that you have to overcome just from that situation alone. And now you have to face not only going through the legal process, but then also going through potentially a financial process. So she's just trying to make it accessible to all income levels, all regions as best as possible. Obviously, like we said, this is just in California at the moment, but she's looking to expand as well. And you can think of it a little bit, the self-help, sorry, what was just make sure I'm not butchering the full name, the Help Self Legal site, a little bit like a TurboTax online, right? In some respects, you're able to go online, and this AI helps you answer questions and gives you sort of like a alerts as to, okay, have you thought about this? Or, hey, these are some of the options that you have based on your answers. Would you like to pursue this, and that, this other thing? You know, for somebody who is not familiar with the legal system, which I don't think many of us are, right? And then especially in cases where there's domestic abuse, where there's family, there's children involved, where potentially, you know, it's hard enough to think clearly when everything is going right in a legal situation. But now you've got this emotional and other things to consider, emotional burdens and things to consider. So even understanding what your options are could be difficult, right? But not everybody has access to a lawyer, whether it's because it's financial or maybe there aren't any in your area.
Or also, there are several that they mention in this article from Mashable. There are several nonprofit organizations that are basically groups of lawyers that will help people through a situation pro bono. But yeah, if you're in these rural areas where those programs don't exist, what are you going to do?
So this AI acts or is meant to act a little bit as a guidance, as a guide, not, you know, clearly. Well, we can getting ahead of myself, but you know, it doesn't quite have the emotional, you know, ability to tell. To offer that emotional guidance, but it can, you know, based on the facts that you give it, can give you factual help back, if that makes sense. And as Evan mentioned, some of these other organizations, you know, have, you know, some of their issues with this site, this AI, is that, well, they aren't a lawyer. You know, they're not a person that can really listen to you and offer, you know, either emotional guidance or tell you what the courts are thinking, you know, how the judges might respond, etc., or necessarily draw upon their expertise to tell you, well, this is kind of what I saw in the past, right? This AI presumably, from what we understand, just sort of looks at your case, looks at the legal code and guides you in that manner. For example, one of these organizations, Laura's House, a domestic violence agency and shelter in Orange County, its legal director, Adam Dodge, you know, he said that he imagines a situation where a user of this help self-legal might make certain requests, like asking that there's no visitation for the children. But that could potentially backfire because courts, for example, do want to preserve the parental relationships when they're possible. So if the AI sort of says, oh yeah, sure, this is an option that you have, is to request no visitation with children, it may not, you know, the AI may not know to say, but also if you do request it, the courts might say, eh.
Yeah, because most court systems want to make sure that they try to keep the family together as best as possible. And so without that lawyer there to help speak for you and to be there for you, they might look at the submission and go, yeah, no, we're not going to abide by this rule because we want to try to keep the family together. And, you know, they make a great example, too, of how this AI can assist you, for instance, when it comes to, say, firearms. You know, if a petitioner says that an abuser owns firearms, it leads to a clear prompt about whether they want the court to consider removing those weapons from the abuser's possession based on the type of violence they've shown in the past and the type of harassment this individual has received and how that could be considered a threat to specific family who are still there on the premises or to that individual if they don't get that restraining order.
But when you don't have a lawyer option at all,
yeah, what do you do?
What do you do, right? Like this is a nice alternative, and it's better to have some idea of an option, right? Like I can still go to TurboTax and see what they say that I should be getting a return for, then I can also go to my tax accountant and say, hey, do my taxes and see what happens. And then I can do my own taxes and see what happens. So it's nice to have the option.
But should it be an end-all be-all, I think, at that point? Because I definitely think it's a great tool personally, and I think it should be there for people who are afraid to come out and say, hey, look, I'm a survivor of domestic abuse, and have to try to rehash everything that's happened to them right away after it being so fresh. And so you can just hop onto this AI system and file everything you need to, and at least get a little sense of relief, give yourself some time to then figure out what your next steps are. And so, yeah, if you don't have the access to a lawyer, then I really think this is at least a great tool. Again, as we always mention, though, with any tool, it's just, you know, my questions would be then, what does privacy look like? What is the protection of the data that's there? What will that look like? Because it seems like many of these announcements that come out, they never talk about what actually concerns people when doing or using tools such as this, which is, okay, well, can everyone get access to my information? Can someone hack this and get all my personal information, then share it out there? Because it's going to have, I'm sure, address and maybe even social security number. I don't know. I mean, I would imagine, though, a fair amount of personal information within these forms.
And if I was a lawyer, my concern would be, crap, is AI going to replace me? Right? Is this one of those jobs that's going to get automated?
Well, another thing, though, is that attorneys are supposed to follow confidentiality. Will this system do the same? Now, I would imagine legally they have to, and especially because it's being created by a lawyer, it will. I'm not, demeaning that by any means, but that's a question to throw out there. And it's a valid question that I think needs to be answered by the company when they say, okay, well, this is really what our system is about, and this is what it's supposed to be here for, and these are the securities. Because again, you're going through enough emotional obstacles as is. You're going through enough trauma as is. We're not trying to add on to that. But those would be just some of my questions. I just want to make sure personally that nothing gets launched out that just really isn't there yet for protection's sake for these people who are victims.
Well, like we mentioned before, that technology is moving so fast that the rules and regulations still need to catch up. And I think AI in particular, this service notwithstanding, but AI in general, I don't know, if you tell your AI assistant something, can you make it not tell it anyone else? Or can someone hack that AI's auditory memory storage and find out that information? Or hack into it and say, oh, anytime this person says this or types in that, flag it for me. I mean, it's fascinating. Like, I don't know I don't know how, what kind of capabilities are built into the back end as well.
Right. Exactly.
How much I is in that AI,
well,
as it were.
And if we're basing this kind of artificial intelligence off, say, something like a TurboTax or what have you, I mean, there's been plenty of times where I've filed my taxes, not to say filing your taxes anything like domestic abuse, but just looking at the specific systems in place that are supposed to handle this type of paperwork. There's been plenty of times where either the AI has messed up something or never gave me the option for something that should be an option.
Exactly. Or it didn't save properly.
And then you got to redo it again, or it gets submitted half done, and then you get told, oh, it was denied or rejected because not all of the paperwork was filled out properly.
This podcast not brought to you by TurboTax.
Or artificial intelligence, evidently. So, and again, there are great examples of AI out there. But again, what kind of AI are they using? What is the coding and protections? And I think the big thing, once again, is just make sure that people don't get an over-reliance on this if they do have the opportunity to go to a lawyer. Because especially if you're in a situation where you need a divorce, you're going to have to go through a lawyer anyway. So you might as well start now creating that relationship, finding one that really works for you, to then start with that restraining order and then go into some of the other legalities of then a potential divorce.
And Dynamite brings up a good point. To kind of go on the other side of the coin, this system potentially could then make it easier for false allegations as well.
Yes, because at least you're putting in the obstacle of time, where if there are false allegations, typically a lot of people won't spend or waste the time to go through a lawyer and do all this other stuff. They'll just go, you know what, whatever, screw it. Unless they really hate the person and go, you know, I'm seething so much and I just want to get back at this person because they were being a jerk to me, that I'm going to do a restraining order. I'm going to take my kids. I'm going to run and go from there. Because there have been situations too, whether man or woman, where a person will take their kids one day, disappear, and then put a restraining order up saying, you can't see me or the kids. And, you know, the other person's going, what just happened?
Yeah.
So the easier you make it, the more issues you might find or the more abuse you could come across in the sense of online.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? The fact that having too many obstacles, too many hoops to jump through can be bad. Not having enough hoops to jump through can also be bad.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. And I don't think there is a perfect answer. It's going to have to be, if we decide to implement this and it does get okayed by other states, is to, in a way, throw it to the wolves in a sense and just go, okay, well, let's try this system and hopefully they just update it and adapt it as best as possible as it goes and progresses and more people start using it. And we'll just have to come back to it and see what happens in the next even just 6 months.
And again, I think it goes back to a lot of the themes that we've certainly noticed in some of our topics, which is intent. You know, what is the intent behind the software, behind whatever sparked the idea for this? And for this particular case, no pun intended, it is to help those that need the help.
Right.
Right. It's low cost. This woman has actually been offering her help pro bono for a while.
So she at least understands his people. You know, it's not like a corporate entity is just going, hey, this would be a great idea because there's a market for it, which sounds really sick and demented when you put it that way in my eyes. But
right. The fact that someone had to create a system to help people for domestic abuse is, right.
That's a whole other story right there for sure.
But, you know, what happens if LegalZoom buys them out, right? Then it's a corporation who just wants your money? Question mark.
Yeah, and that's what usually happens too, is that there are some of these great concepts, these great products and services that come out that are really meant to be altruistic as best as possible within a corporatist type of system, right? And it's like, well, they're trying to make money to survive, but they really do legitimately want to help their target audience. But then, yes, they get bought out and then things start to change. And then you start getting issues. Ironically enough, actually, in the news, this was, I think, several months ago, maybe it's even longer now, but there was something out on the interwebs that used to be free and you would, you know, donate if you want to support it, which was called Crap Cleaner or CC Cleaner. They eventually changed their name over time.
I was like, Crap Cleaner. Oh, CC Cleaner. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and they were meant to get off all the kind of spyware and junk that gets collected and pushed onto your computer from browsing the internet. And they ended up recently, as far as I'm aware of, getting bought out by a much larger company. And guess what happens when they get bought out? They get hacked. The system is supposed to help in a way against junk on your computer, getting hacked. That system now gets hacked. There was no issues before when it was a smaller based company getting supported by the people. And their goal was to help people with this issue of too much of this garbage on their computers. They get bought up by a big company. Suddenly they go downhill. And they get hacked and there's issues with it. And people are now concerned about their privacy because they use CC Cleaner going, oh my God. So, you know, anything could really happen. And it's really interesting to see where these types of corporate mergers will take us. And will take our economy and will take our industry.